Welcome, everyone, to ARTIVISM, the Power of Art for Social Transformation. We have with us today John Rea. John's introduction to the business of communication arts combined his love for design and music as art director at Rolling Stone magazine, working with then staff photographer Annie Leibovitz. After several years as a designer, he began an advertising career working on some of the world's best-known brands, Coca-Cola, Intel, Volvo, Coppertone, and Clarendon. As executive creative director for digital marketing, he's combined his talents in design and multi-channel thinking to help build the digital and integration division at Havas Tonic, one of the largest fully integrated consumer health and wellness agencies in North America. He is not simply a believer in creative integration. He teaches a course about it at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, as well as a course in purposeful marketing. Currently on the faculty, he lectures there regularly, and he continues to be actively involved in connecting students with internship programs, fellowships, and job positions. Welcome, John.
Thank you. That's very nice of you, RG. Thank you. And hi, everyone. Welcome. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to first let me introduce myself, and then we're going to take over the screen, and I have a presentation to share, which includes a lot of slides, a lot of creative work, and a handful of videos that I think you might find interesting to see. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I've been in the design and advertising business my entire career. So as an ECD, Executive Creative Director of Digital Marketing, my job has always been to keep my eye on the trends and the opportunities in advertising. And lately, I've been focusing on what has really exploded in advertising, and that's social omni-channel marketing. And that's really a fancy term for all the social apps that are out there, and synchronizing all those touch points to reach really pretty much anyone, especially in the health and wellness space. And I'll get into that a little more. So I've been very lucky. I've been lucky to work on great brands, as RG just said, brands like Coca-Cola and Intel and Volvo. These are massive consumer brands. But I've also worked on the other side of that equation in advertising, which is pharma or pharmaceuticals, right? And those are all of the drug ads and all the drug launches that you see every morning during the news and every afternoon or late evening news, right? You cannot watch television today without being blitzed by all of the different types of drugs that are out there. And I'll speak a lot about that in a minute. I've also been an adjunct professor at the School of Visual Arts for several years. In fact, I'll be teaching 2 classes this summer, as I usually do, Transform Our World and Your Portfolio. That's a course specifically tailored to what I'm going to speak to today. And another course called Digital Practices for an Integrated Advertising World. And the title sounds long and complicated, but it's basically saying advertising is not TV and print ads anymore. It is this whole integrated process. And if you've ever ordered anything on Amazon, you've probably been touched by several touch points within a customer journey, as we like to call it. So from being aware of a product to what that product does and what that product means, to how to order it. And of course, you always get a follow-up email, or what we call a customer relationship marketing email. So advertisers are doing all they can to stretch out any purchase that you make and to create a real relationship with everyone. In fact, I'm going to drop those 2 courses. If you care to read about them, I'm going to drop a link in the chat now. If you're interested, just copy those and check them out some other time. So what am I going to talk about today? There's been a massive shift in this country. And this is a country that's been obsessed with consumerism. In fact, I've looked up on how storage facilities are doing. They're all at 95% capacity. Besides being expensive, they are booked, and consumers just can't stop buying in this country and in the globe. And consumers not only want to know about the brands that they buy, but they really also want to know what they stand for. So I'm here to help students identify the opportunities that this trend presents. So as I go through this presentation, there are two very distinct areas I want you to understand to kind of keep this on track because it gets complicated. Um, and it's really about the two different areas where companies are better defining their purpose over profits. That's a phrase that's used a lot in advertising now. Um, so first, I'm going to talk about consumer products, products like Dove and Warby Parker, Ben and Jerry's. And second part of this presentation is going to be about the health and wellness categories, companies and organizations that are raising awareness for conditions out there like HIV, cancer, and rare disease. Okay, so that's kind of my little quick setup. So, RJ, if you don't mind, if you can put up our presentation deck. So like I said earlier, this will be a number of slides as well as a number of videos. I've given this lecture before at the School of Visual Arts, the continuing education department, and it's really we call it the rise of purposeful marketing in the health and beyond. And this image that we came up with to help identify what this is all about uh, was generated in AI, and the input for this was just taking advertising icons of different backgrounds and different ethnicities and have each of them in a very stylized manner, hold the globe, the earth in their hand, because that's kind of what this is all about. It's about consumers who are extremely concerned about so many of the issues existing on our planet right now. So if we go to the next slide, uh, I think what's important here is to show that, I don't know if any of this is news to you, but people's values are shifting, and so are their relationships with brands. And with technology, search, social media buying platforms, there are way more choices for consumers, as we were just saying, RG. Consumers can be a lot more choiceful, as I like to call it. 82% of shoppers want a consumer brand's values to align with their own. 75% of shoppers reported parting ways with a brand over a conflict in values. So this idea of having 17 ways to buy iced tea or an energy drink, people are starting to realize, well, wait a minute, my vote really does count here. I don't only have a choice of one, and I can choose the brand that I feel best reflects what my values are. So technology has given buyers this access to brands that align with their more consumer values. So if we go to the next slide, I don't know if has anyone here seen this game? It's called Mind the Gap, and it's basically Trivial Pursuit, but they ask that you try to play with 4 different generations. Have one person that is a boomer. And, I have a chart here because I often get these confused. So let me define what each of these are, right? So a boomer, a baby boomer, AKA, right, otherwise known as, they right now are between the ages of 60 and 78 years old. Gen X, right, 1965 through 1980. So they were there for a very different culture, a very different explosion in music, politics, right? Then now comes the real fun part. And if you go to the next slide, this whole lecture revolves around these last 2 categories: millennials, who are born between 1981 and 96. And we all, obviously know people within that category. There's also Gen Z, and the Gen Zers are from 1997 to 2012. So that's interesting because if you look this up online, you'll realize that each generation got a little shorter. In fact, there's already Gen Alpha, and Gen Alpha has been, they started in the early 2010s up until today. So this game needs to be modified. But the fun of this game is just pointing out just the generations, they're really changing. The culture is changing. The content that or the broadcast that they absorb and younger audiences absorb are completely different, and how they absorb it are completely different. So I thought this was an interesting way to kind of get at why has this purposeful brands that care subject come up. And why is it so popular now? It's because of this section of targets, the millennials and the Gen Z. Okay, and this game, it's like I said, it's called Mind the Gap, which is a very clever title. So if we go to the next slide, and what this slide is basically saying is these purposeful positions are good for business, right? Companies that have a higher market share gains and grow on average 3 times faster than their competitors. So if you have a purpose, those millennials and those Gen Zers are you're going to capture their imagination than if you're not in that purposeful space. Next slide. So I'm going to start with this first part of this lecture, which is what I call brands with purpose. Okay. Now, these are going to be with some of the most creative, most impactful, purposeful work that's been done for consumer brands. And as you'll see, the most successful efforts are from brands that make authentic connections between what they sell and what they stand for. And that word authentic is key. So I'm going to keep pointing that out with each of these examples because things have changed today. Years ago, it was just a brand like AT&T that would just give to a charity, right? Or you would watch a broadcast, or they would say, we're donating money, every cent of that we make today selling hot dogs, it's going to go to this certain charity. Well, today things have to be a little bit more transparent because people don't trust that, and you're not making that authentic connection. So if we go to back up a slide, there we go. So this is a great place to start. The Redefine Beauty campaign. There is no better way to start talking about purposeful advertising than this example. Dove is generally accepted as the brand that kicked off the purpose-led movement with their Real Beauty campaign. It started about 20 years ago, and it was really a game changer. And the work made an immediate impact because it debunked the status quo with a real truth. What was that real truth? Real women just don't look like the ads they're portrayed in. If you concentrate on the area in the upper left corner there, that is what we call an ecosystem. That's the top left of this diagram. And this is how this ecosystem was launched. Okay, at the very center is the brand. And then around there, that brand and that brand idea are all of the touch points: television, their website, their online banners, their movements for self-esteem, print, and of course, social ads. If you've never seen the evolution video, I highly recommend you go on YouTube and check it out. It's called Evolution. Just search for Evolution Dove. It was done I'd say about 20 years ago, but it still has a very powerful message today. Now, what makes this campaign so powerful is the other examples along the bottom here. This was not just about defining what real beauty is, but it's also, they've kept this campaign extremely relevant. They're addressing the social pressures young girls face today with the retouching apps and the dangers of toxic beauty advice, both mentally and physically. So if you look at some of those ads, 80% of girls are using retouching apps by age 13. 1 in 3 girls don't think they look good without photo editing. I mean, this is shocking information, and they're using this data and they're feeding it to their target so that people really start to understand like what's really at stake here. And parents need to get involved, and we need to get young people to talk about this, because I don't have to go into the issues that have happened with social media and the bullying that goes on. So, here's where a brand that makes moisturizing creams and soaps really addressing something much more powerful, right? When you have a brand, you really need to make that connection. And that's what these advertisers are doing. They want to stand for something much deeper. But another thing I find really interesting, if you look at the logo in the upper left, it is the Dove logo with the little dove. Dove logo with the dove. And then in the center there, they've revised it and they've added 3 doves, and they're taking off and they're growing. And the last one turns to gold. maybe this is getting a little overthought here, but it is trying to say that, this is a process, and we want to be there with the journey as you grow. And they have, as it says here, they have a whole self-esteem project. If you haven't seen some of their other advertising, just do some searches on it. They are really tapped into what women are going through today. It's really a fantastic campaign. Next is a campaign. This is another defining moment in establishing a brand purpose. The Opt Outside campaign for REI, which stands for Recreational Equipment Incorporated. I had to look it up myself. They sell camping gear, hiking and outdoor apparel. And on Black Friday, a number of years ago, the biggest retail of the year rather, they decided to close their doors and give their staff the day off with pay and encourage shoppers to opt outside. That was the whole campaign, hashtag opt outside. This campaign had over 2 billion media impressions in the first 24 hours, not to mention numerous Cannes Lions for their PR agency, Edelman. And it really leverages the power of social, a viral idea on social. It was launched entirely digitally on the web. And it was one of the first to really leverage and use this whole hashtag technology to help give the campaign momentum and shareability. Okay, so here's another one that's doing something for the community out there rather than just concentrating on bottom line sales results. And it made an impression on people. Next, this one touts Warby Parker and Tom's. They have a giving back positioning, Warby and Tom's, from day one. They started their brand purpose in their business model. And that's the advantage a lot of these new competitive brands have over older established ones. And I'll show you an established brand in a minute. But most new brands that come out today have some type of purposeful effort and belief in their mission. That's how important this has become. And we've all seen this with brands like Allbirds, Free People, Bombas. They just wanted to call this out, this whole buy one, give one notion. And millennials and Gen Zers are loving this, and they love brands that give back. So let's go to the next slide. And here's one of the older brands. And I know I said these new competitive brands have an advantage over established ones, but here's a very established brand, Hellmann's. And whether you know it or not, they've really changed their entire advertising style. And they've done a great job of doing this while being under the radar. And by that, I mean, when you look at their website, you see some of their advertising, you might not quite understand. Think you've got nothing to eat, right? This seems like there's going to be recipes and there's going to be ways of using and buying more Hellmann's. And so they're merging their product with their purpose, right? It's more than just mayo. It's about food waste. Leftovers get dry, and Hellmann's can solve that. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see a commercial that ran 2 Super Bowls ago. And I'm just going to let this play for a second. Or a minute, I should say.
John?
Bree, wow, great to see you in this giant fridge. Why are we here?
Well, I'm Bree.
Yeah, I'm John.
I know, but you're John who?
John Hamm. We've met a million times.
Bree and?
John Hamm. Oh, Bree and Ham. Ham and Bree. I get it. And Hellmann's.
You know, it's a good thing you're handsome.
Thank you.
We are dinner.
Well, with Hellmann's, we can really be anything. I mean, all these leftovers can, right? Is that Pete Davidson?
Uh-huh.
No food name.
He really is everywhere.
I'm gonna eat you guys. Panini? 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 Yes. You guys are really delicious.
It's weird.
Hellmann's brings leftovers to life.
That's from the Unilever people, who also, they're the makers of Dove. You don't realize it, but as you're watching that, it's a brand that cares about this horrendous notion that 40% of our food goes in the trash. And it's a real problem. It's a real issue. And You know, when you think of all the Uber Eats and the Grubhub meals that we're ordering, you can see why this is maybe not the most efficient way to consume our food. So that campaign's been getting a lot of attention. I have one more slide. And this last example isn't a consumer brand, but it is timely. Greenpeace is a cause brand. This next video is a minute and a half, and it only ran on digital channels. It got 7.5 million views on Instagram and YouTube and Twitter, and millions of shares. Let's just play this spot because I think the power of it will be evident.
There is no greater duty for any nation than protecting our people and our planet. The UK government is a global leader in tackling plastic pollution, and we can be incredibly proud of what we are doing. Plastic everywhere, out and out. What in the wibbly fiddlesticks? We're packing crisps. Help! We have banned plastic straws, plastic stirrers, and plastic cotton buds to make sure that we turn the tide. It is time for the world to truly wake up to the damage being done to the environment and the sheer volume of plastic that is dumped. Let us secure the very health of the planet for our children, grandchildren, and generations to come.
You know, when you see a video like that, you can understand why this generation is so motivated for change. I mean, just the special effects of that spot and the enormity at the end. I even love the little, the little dig at Coca-Cola in the lower left-hand corner on the double-decker bus. But it's so powerful. That spot is called Wastminster. It's a little play on Westminster. And it was the satirical video by Greenpeace. It's called A Downing Street Disaster. I also love how that spot, you got to love how they portray people as plastic to make a point about it, the issue even more strongly. Or it was either that or to avoid on-camera talent payments. I'm not sure, but that spot really hits me hard. And it's really a great example, again, of purposeful advertising. So if we go to the next slide, now we're going to change the focus. Purpose campaigns are not only for environmental, societal, and accessibility and gender equality issues, but it's also for the health challenges out there and the stigmas that come along with them. Health brands are doing a lot more than just running 60-second pharma spots. They too need to have a purpose. So if you go to the next slide, and while there are, I don't know if you're familiar with a lot of these brands, quite amazing, how strong these brands are in our conscience, right? Standing up to cancer, the whole ALS Ice Bucket Challenge a number of years ago, the Partnership for a Drug-Free America, the campaign for RED that was spearheaded by Bono, UNICEF, the Ad Council, the American Heart Association. These are all, these are health-focused corporations and organizations and alliances that are acting more like brands because they have a mission to accomplish, right? And you have to, I love the Bono and Red example, the power of celebrity. with a very unconventional idea behind not just donations, but giving a community the power to help themselves and turn themselves into a profitable nonprofit, which is, kind of an oxymoron, but that's exactly what that is. So let's get started. This first one's a great example. Next slide. Of the power of social media. So the richest man in Brazil announces on Facebook that he is going to bury his Bentley. So that he could drive around the afterlife in style. So he posted this. So of course he got criticized for this, outrage everywhere on Facebook. How could he be so selfish? What is wrong with this person? That's a horrendous thought. When in reality, what he was drawing attention for was organ donation, and that burying a priceless body organs was the same as burying a Bentley. This went very viral, and it was shared and this was used to kick off Brazil's National Organ Donation Week. I mean, talk about something going viral. Talk about what we call cultural capital. This became such a story, and people were sharing it, and because it seemed so outrageous. And then when it was revealed that he was drawing an analogy for organ donation, it really, a brilliant idea. Let's go to the next brilliant idea. This idea does a great job of leapfrogging over some of the challenges of driving awareness of breast cancer and breast exams on social media platforms. How does one show how to perform a self-examination for breast cancer when you can't show a woman's nipple? I'll leave it at that. Let's play the video. That's just a slide. That's the video.
Women's boobs, particularly their nipples, are censored in certain social networks even when showing how to perform breast self-examinations to detect early breast cancer. But we found boobs that aren't censored. Henry's. Hello, let's begin. Standing in front of a mirror, place your hands on your hips. Check your breasts for any changes in skin or nipples, including swelling, redness or lumps.
Si nosotros hubiéramos utilizado los pechos femeninos, definitivamente hubiera sido, creo, censurado en las redes. Aquí en Argentina se detectan aproximadamente 18.000 casos nuevos de cáncer de mama por año, de los cuales una tercera parte aproximadamente fallecen. Muchas de estas razones tienen que ver con el haber llegado a un diagnóstico en forma tardía.
Share this video or make your own. All you need is a pair of man boobs.
That came out of an Argentinian breast cancer charity company or corporation called MACMA, along with a very creative agency called David that obviously cleverly sidestepped censorship laws by using this bare-chested Henry or whatever they call them. Really, this campaign's been awarded on several levels. And I love using that as an example in my classes when, students say, oh, I couldn't think of anything in the brief. There were too many, obstacles to get by. Here's a classic example. Well, what do we do? Well, you can show a man's breast. Well, why can you show a man's breast? Well, it doesn't matter. Let's just do the exam on a man. Really smart. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And this is an example. This next example had a very powerful effect on me personally. A few years back, I was approached by a teenager who told me she was working to help raise awareness for the children suffering from epidermolysis bullosa, which is a genetic skin disorder, a connective tissue disease. And as their tagline says, it is the worst disease you've never heard of. This girl connected us to Deborah. Deborah is an organization that helps. It's the only nonprofit organization serving this EB community. And after hearing what these families go through, caring for these children and the expense of bandaging their skin, it's in the tens of thousands a month. we decided to help create video content to help bring attention to this. Again, awareness, and especially in rare disease, is paramount. These people feel very, very isolated, obviously, because no one can empathize with them. And it's funny, having worked in this category, it's true even with people who suffer from migraines. A lot of research has been done, and the feeling about migraines is, people don't believe them. They feel that they tell their boss or their coworker that they can't come in because they got a migraine, and they think you're faking. So there are a lot of stigmas, and there are a lot of things to overcome. So we decided, like I said, to create this video content to help bring attention to this. So everything we did was pro bono. And we're gonna play one of the spots that we created. It is, I want to warn you, it is quite graphic. These children do suffer from a lot of bruising because their skin is so delicate. It comes out of the idea that these sufferers are called the butterfly children. So why don't we play that video?
I'm Asa. I smile like any other kid. I play like any other kid. I like to explore like any other kid. But I'm not any other kid. I was born with EB. My skin is as fragile as a butterfly's wing, so it hurts to walk and talk and even get a hug.
Asa was born with epidermolysis bullosa, the worst disease you've never heard of.
The pain never goes away, and the sores are on the inside too, so it even hurts to eat.
5 years ago, there was no treatment for kids with EB. But today, there's hope on the horizon. Help fund the research and be a part of the cure. Go to Deborah.org and give today, because the cost of doing nothing is too great.
I'm Asa.
This content was shown at their annual fundraiser in New York City on the walls of the Guggenheim Museum. It helped raise $750,000 that evening. These video assets we created have been very successful for Deborah, not only in building awareness, but also they continue to be shown in the White House and on Capitol Hill to elected officials in the Senate to influence legislation for hopefully more funding. And this is just one of the images of that fundraiser that evening. Very emotional. Working on stuff like this, it gives a completely different focus on what I do for a living. And there are obviously hundreds of other rare diseases that unless you are made aware of them, it's almost like an unsung story. Oh, and that teenager who, by the way, who started this whole thing, well, she ended up giving to go to the next slide. I think it's on the next slide. She ended up giving a TEDx talk about it in London, which made us all very proud, especially me. Can anyone guess why? I'll tell you what, I'll put the URL in the chat. How's that? Anyway, for those of you, that's my daughter up there, if you didn't notice the resemblance. But so that's why as I open this with, this has such a personal, this project had such a personal effect a powerful effect on me personally. So and now the last, we come around, we're almost toward the end here. This is the last one. This is another issue that needed a boost in awareness. For those who haven't heard of PrEP, it's a medication that came out about 10 years ago. It's extremely effective at preventing HIV transmission. And when taken correctly, it's 99% effective. Now, PrEP is a unique acronym. It stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis. And it has this very unusual lowercase r. So anytime you see this word PrEP, it is always indicated like this. Okay. So I created this unbranded campaign. And what I mean by unbranded is when you watch this content, there is no brand connected to it. The name of the drug is not here. The name of the corporation that is paying for this advertising is not on it. It is unbranded. It is just to raise awareness about PrEP. And to celebrate PrEP, you know, we were hoping to also reduce any stigma that still may exist about PrEP. If you're unfamiliar with that, just do a little search on Truvada, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. You'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see what we've done with that little iconic R to help people reimagine or to elevate this game-changing medication. So the first video you'll see is a pre-roll that ran on YouTube. So we'll play that.
We gon' keep on rising. We gon' keep on shining. We gon' keep on rising, rising up.
So the call to action there was go to rethinkprep.com. And when you go to that site, before we play these, you'll be educated on how PrEP has changed. There's been a breakthrough in it. Originally, Truvada is a pill you need to take every day. And in that category, it's called pill burden. Nobody likes to take a pill every day about something like that. It just keeps reminding you of the issue. So this new drug that's coming out, it's already out now. It is an injection every other month. So only 6 injections a year instead of a pill every day. And this was the campaign just to help people to rethink what they already know about PrEP. Let's play the next one. These are the ones, these videos were social videos, short format on Instagram. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that it did not just stop on social platforms. This was also taken to the streets. This was a multi-channel effort that had over 50 million impressions, all during Pride Month in key cities across the U.S. You know, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philly, Dallas, Miami. All across the U.S. And this double-decker bus was wrapped with the campaign idea, and it strolled down Fifth Avenue that day. So up on top of the buses are the clients, and if you look real closely, I'm up there too, wearing one of the shirts. And that is, I believe, it. One last slide that just says thank you. This all boils down to being authentic and using the right emotion in social so that people want to get involved. They don't roll their, anything you see sometimes now that, you roll your eyes, well, that person has failed. You need to get on board with these efforts. And hopefully the content that is created is creative enough to capture your imagination. For the creative community out there, this opportunity is evident for art directors, designers, writers. Agencies are looking for talent to help solve these issues in new and fresh ways. Because, my opinion is until these world problems go away, which they're not yet, and there are many of them, until they're solved, purposeful marketing isn't going anywhere. So hopefully this was a little inspiring and opened up some eyes. And I'd love to hear some thoughts if you guys have any questions or any points of view, if you've seen anything recently out there that, captured your attention. For example, the new Coca-Cola campaign, which is it's a big red outdoor board and their logo is crushed and smashed. And at the very bottom of the ad, it says recycle. So I'm going to turn it over to everyone here and let me know if you have any questions.
But if I may, I'll just quickly dive in and say I loved it. Thank you. That was so fascinating and so inspiring. Given me so many ideas. I'm totally going to come along and do some of the courses from the that you were advertising was just brilliant. Such a different way of thinking. I
Great.
work in music myself and music education, and I'm looking at decolonizing Latin American music. So yeah, I'm definitely going to take some ideas and brainstorm on this. Thank you. It was great.
Great, great. I tell everyone who gets inspired by this, which is, you can contribute. Find a. It was my daughter who brought that epidermolysis bullosa problem to me and to the agency. Talk to people. Everyone knows someone who has some condition, and I don't know why that is. I think it's because communication is intensified. I think it's because we're all getting slowly poisoned. And there's a lot of contamination. And, I'm one of those conspiracy thinkers that is always, watching something on, some documentary about what's in our food, what's in our environment, what's going on out there, get involved. So, take this as a platform for doing something for good.
These were all so thought-provoking. And Tariq, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. Oh, no.
So,
There you go.
okay, great. I just want to thank you, John, for doing this, and of course you, RG, and Carolina for having it. And I'm just kind of curious to know what sorts of the thought process, that go into finding, I guess, would be insights that allow for these messages to resonate with people and to be based in authenticity. I imagine it's different or majorly or slightly different from one brand to the next, but I'm just wondering if you have any sense for what some of those.
That's a great question. So I'll give you the two examples I showed. The commercial, the content we did for the little children, we met with the president of the foundation, and in one of the pieces, his little girl also has EB. We spoke to him. We talked about it. He showed us a lot of photographs. We were pretty taken aback, and he said, "I want this shown. I do not want to sugarcoat this. I do not want to see metaphors. I do not want to see something that skirts the issue and sort of tries under the radar. Let's be very bold about this." And if you go to the Deborah.org, you'll see the other spots that we did, and they're even more graphic and more heartbreaking. So that was a brand that needed, maybe brand's not quite the right word, but that's a condition that needed to shake the public and to pay off this idea of the worst disease you've never heard of. It's interesting. I've done lectures about it, and everyone knows about the Ice Bucket Challenge, and that's for ALS, otherwise known as the Lou Gehrig's disease. And now it's been rebranded because no one knows who Lou Gehrig is anymore. So now you look at that tonality, and then you look at what we did for PrEP. Now, PrEP is about having sexual freedom. PrEP is about no matter what you're into, and no matter what you're, what you want to do with your social and your community, here's a drug that can help you. And if you listen to the CEO of GSK, or ViiV Healthcare, which is the corporation behind that, they want to eradicate HIV. And by having what is almost, it's not quite a cure, but it's an antidote. And if you take it as directed, and if no one can pass it, and we already know that people who are on medication who have HIV, they do become undetectable. So, that's a completely different tone. That's not about using scare tactics, right? That's about sexual freedom. So if you look at, the poppy colors and the dancing and the different communities and targets that we represented there, it feels very engaging and encompassing of all the culture, and therefore, oh, this must be a good thing. So that's a great question. How do you even begin to talk about some of these subjects? And these subjects can get intense, like the spot with the London producing too much plastic and really poisoning the environment. Let's do something about it. Let's just not stop making plastic straws. That's not the problem. The straws are not the problem. So it comes down to a lot of people talking about it. And what I think is most important in my job is listening to people who have the conditions. I've worked on asthma, COPD, people who smoke their whole lives and now walk around with an oxygen tank. I hear what they have to say. I've spoken to people who have really severe psoriasis, what that means to them, not wearing shorts in the summer because they don't want people to see their skin. Every one of these categories has a stigma attached to it, and it's about how to address those stigmas so that you're making people feel part of the idea. You get people's heads nodding versus someone who might roll their eyes and go, "Oh, that was really not the right tone." So, or pandering, probably a better way of saying it.
Right. I mean, to me, that seems like one of, I'm sure, several, if not many, challenges where you have to strike the right tone and present things in a way that, as you said, is representative of the community that is being addressed or affected by the issue, and yet also in a way that is, depending on the issue or the campaign, draws in people who are not part of the community, and to be able to strike a tone and have a message that addresses those groups in an effective positive way. It seems like it have its challenges depending on.
Yeah. Well, that's why there's two sections to this, because the first part is about getting people to maybe think of Hellman's more often and maybe not tossing all the leftovers away. That's a very, and that's a very different tone than how do we get somebody to, give themselves a breast examination and check for, some early cancer signs, breast cancer signs. So, but that's what always attracted me to advertising and marketing. I talk to a lot of people who do a lot of different things for a living, and it always seems that the marketing stories are the ones that kind of become the most interesting because they involve you. We can all relate to them. We all use products, no matter what you're wearing right now. What phone do you have? What earphones are you wearing? Etc. They all say something about you. Any other questions?
Well, I think, in viewing all of these, that what it does show young people and those watching it is a sense, you're giving them a sense of empowerment, right? That they do have the power to choose one over another, to research, what is more mindful, what is more purposeful, and opt for that, not to buy certain brands that, use child labor, that, is outsourced and all of that. So I did have a question. Your classes, are they online or in person?
They've been online since COVID struck. So yeah, fortunately and unfortunately, I miss the interaction.
Yeah, fortunately and
However,
unfortunately. Yes.
yeah. However, I do get students from all over the globe. So, it's that's a good thing, right? The other thing I've always said is I think the thing with millennials and Gen Z and why they've so connected to brands, my personal feeling is they know or think that government has let them down because government can't make up its mind and they end up doing nothing, right? Because there's all those checks and balances, right? So they turn to brands because they know that Nike could move a mountain if they had to. They know that McDonald's could plant a whole new rainforest somewhere. They're so successful. So I think that's why now the role of brands in people's lives is a lot different than when, our parents bought something, they just bought it because they wanted it and they needed it. And today it's a vote. It's almost a vote. I'm also going to throw something in the chat. It's a link. Look at it at your leisure. It was a campaign that was done last year. It's called Working with Cancer. It was done out of the Publicis Group, which is an advertising network. And what's fascinating about it, it was because the CEO of Publicis had a cancer. He was diagnosed with cancer. So he took it upon himself to say, you know what, let's address the stigma that comes along with cancer. You're working. And most people, if you watch The Spot, you'll see titles that talk about people don't want to talk to HR about it because they're afraid. And what's it going to mean? Am I going to lose my job? And am I going to lose my position? And, I think this is, I throw that out there because when the CEO of a company comes down with a condition and turns it into a mission for his agency, I mean, that's just how important this has become. And people want to get these stories out there. So it's called Working with Cancer. We're workingwithcancerpledge.com, but you have the link. Look at it at your own leisure. What else did I want to bring up? There's all kinds of little efforts that are going on out there. It could be about opioid addiction, alcohol addiction. There's so many issues out there today that need addressing and need awareness, because you can only start solving the problem when you know what the problem is. And that's why there are agencies out there who do only purposeful efforts. One of the names of the agencies is called Oberland. I think the web address is thisisoberland.com. I'll put it in the chat. And that's all they do is help brands find their true, authentic cause, which is interesting because you would think everyone has one, but that's not necessarily true. So I'll put that in the chat. And of course they have.
Is there something you find your students most concerned about?
No, not one. I've given out an assignment, and if you want, I'm happy to share some work that my students have done. In fact, that's a good question because there are so many issues out there, and each one touches people differently. So let me share one of the assignments that came out of my class. So this assignment came about because I had a friend who had Lyme disease, and they lived in the suburbs, and even their child also had Lyme disease, and it's a crushing disease, and no one likes to talk about it. But I found a little sweet spot in the strategy, and the strategy was, most New Yorkers who live in the cities, they're unaware that if they take a vacation on the weekend and go camping or go out just for a long hike, they're susceptible to, getting a tick bite, and they just don't think about it. So the assignment was to raise awareness to New Yorkers, urban dwellers, of Lyme disease. And this is what the student came up with. Hopefully you can see that. The title of it is Spot the Mark. And this is all about, Lyme disease awareness holds great importance in New York City residents. The disease can be contracted locally or during travel beyond the city, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is to inform city residents of the bullseye mark and educate them on how to spot the rash and how to deal with the problem, which is kind of it's a very striking mark, by the way. He did some out of home. So these are some bus shelters. Like a tick's bullseye, this ad will only remain for 30 days. And it has this little ticking clock. And most people who look at that go, I didn't even realize that mark was there. And by the way, it lasts on an average of 30 days. So if you see it, it's a race against time, as it says on the bottom. Spot the mark, call a doctor, visit spotthemark.com. Very nice, creative way of shaking. And then he had these ideas of different experiential posters out there, people using it as a bullseye, as a mark, right? He did some neat social pieces there. Now that you've found the mate, keep an eye out for the mark, and maybe that's on Tinder, the one in the center. I thought that was really clever. If you have a new relationship and you happen to see this on them, don't not mention it, talk about it, right? Because a lot of times people don't even see it. It could be on the back of your neck, you'd never know it, or on the back of your ankle. So I thought this was really special work. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Another student came up with this, which I thought was quite brilliant. We need to have the TikTok on TikTok. So a really great play, a word play here. And let's see, I believe he did he sort of did this sort of theme idea, giving TikTokers the TikTok in an effort to help protect them from contracting Lyme disease when they're outdoors. And each one of these people would be real people who contracted Lyme's disease, and they hashtag where they got it. You know, this girl got it playing hide and seek, the hide and seek challenge, hashtag Cottage Cove, beach cleanup, you know, all these different places where you might get it. And they're all true stories. So I thought those were really, really well done. Any thoughts on that work? Does it look like the type of work you guys are familiar with, capable of, want to do?
I find them pretty brilliant. Both of them were very well done, very inspiring.
Yeah. So, you know, to answer the question about what's the most topical issue there, you know, in some ways, in fact, I'll even give you one of my other assignments. It's to go into a supermarket and find a product that does not have a purposeful effort.
Mm-hmm.
This is a lot harder than you think. So, for example, if you go in a supermarket and you see a 6-pack of Red Bull, you got to go to redbull.com and you got to look and see if they have any charity work that they're doing. So this is a lot harder than you think. However, you'd be shocked. I got some terrific solutions on products that, you know, you would never even think they would have one, or that they don't, and that these students came up with neat ideas for them. But, you know, that's the trick. The trick is to find a product, but then, like, what do you do for something for like silver polish, right? I mean, that's a product. I don't know if that product necessarily needs a purposeful campaign, right? So you have to find something that makes a very perfect connection, just like Hellman's mayonnaise does to helping food waste, just like Warby Parker does when they donate other free glasses to underserved communities. You know, it's a little tricky. Ben and Jerry's has been doing it for years. It's another brand. And then, of course, you know, careful of the traps. You know, many of the products that we wear are very, very involved in purposeful marketing. And I mentioned a number of them earlier. Allbirds. It's funny; those are brands that, you know, brands that we wear, which is interesting. You know, some of the strongest brands are. They always say it's the automobile you pull up in your driveway in. But I think some of the brands that that's because you pay 50 grand for them. But the other brands that you wear, especially makeup and cologne and perfumes in that category, cosmetics, those are brands you have to have a connection to, because you're putting them on you, you know, and people can see that, whether it's a watch or a logo on your pants and on your shirt. So that opens up a whole other category and a whole other discussion. We could talk for hours about this. At least I could talk for hours about it.
Yes, thank you, Professor Rea, for all this wonderful conversation that we've been having today. And thank you to the audience also for the participation. Before we go to the closing remarks also, I just want to invite you all for next Monday, our closing event on May 6th here in ARTIVISM. It's going to be Michelle Anglisano, and she'll be discussing her healing process and the journey of her past, which created a life of comfort. For more information on this series, past and upcoming events, please go to the website at www.adelphi.edu/artivism. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, also at Artivism for Shared Humanity, or also just simply Googling Artivism Initiative. Our YouTube channel is Artivism for Shared Humanity with the number 4 in the cipher instead of letters. Also, if you'd like to get involved in planning or exhibitions, as we do have a couple coming up, you can reach out to the team. The open call that is now open is for the full poster design, and you can look at all the information on our website. Before we go to the takeaway for today's session, I would like to ask Professor Rea, what about the financing of these decisions? That would be my question, because yes, as you mentioned, we have all topics that touch us, but we all might not have the budget to support an advertising or marketing campaign for them.
Right. Well, certainly money is always an issue, but let me make you aware, there's three kinds of media. There's paid media, and that's directly addresses your question. Because where do you get that money to get people to see your ad? Even if you have, I don't know, you want to say something on LinkedIn, you need, if you want to get people outside of the people who follow you, you need to pay money for that, right? So that's called paid media. There's another media, and it's called owned media. And by that, it means what your company or organization owns. What do you own? You own a website. You own a channel on YouTube. You own maybe a retail store somewhere, and whatever that might be. Maybe you sell things to help raise funds for your cause. And then there's earned media. So it's paid, owned, and earned. And earned is a lot of the stuff I just shared with you. And earned means that people shared it. It was so creative that people wanted to share it. That's what I call it, cultural capital. Like, people love sharing that piece about breast cancer and Henry's male boobs, right? People love sharing that story about the guy with the Rolls Royce, and it turned out to be for donating your organs. That's earned media. So if you don't have a budget, then you have to try to do something that is really going to go viral. And that's tricky today. You know, the definition of viral is unintended mass viewership. So by definition, it means you didn't really even start that way. So it's kind of hard to say you're going to do something that's going to go viral. Good luck, because there are a lot of companies out there would love that. It's not that easy, because people know when it's an ad. People know when there's something there that they don't necessarily want to attach themselves to, so they don't share it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, money is always an issue. And all these organizations, a lot of times, you know, they're given free media, but like at 1 a.m. And if you've ever had insomnia, like I had many years ago, that's when you see all the spots about, you know, loneliness, and because these broadcast companies, they have to donate certain amount of media time. In fact, some of the Deborah work did air on television. It wasn't only on digital, but it's not prime time. You know, you don't get free media during the Oscars and the Super Bowl, obviously. So it is a big question and a tough one. And that's why there's people who, you know, are strategists. That's why, as creatives, you know, it's not necessarily our sweet spot. You know, you should try to find someone who's a marketer, and has a similar interest, and maybe has some other skills in helping to get donations and that sort of thing. You know, by the way, that whole EB campaign was shot by a director that I had given him a very nice job to do some content with people telling their stories, people who contracted HIV and are on medication. So I said, hey, would you do me this big favor? It was a full day of shooting. They showed up with all the bells and whistles, cameras, gaffers, lighting equipment, all done pro bono. So, you know, you get people motivated, you can maybe get something done.
Yes, thank you. We have a couple of comments on the chat, so make sure you check them out. There's a lot of thank yous from the audience. Thank you for sharing your experience, right? Your thoughts, promoting more broadly her artwork. Miss Vicky got ideas about that. We also thank you for being so informative and helpful from Giancarlo, and Madison Castillo says, thank you for your presentation on marketing as well as trends that have a purpose for brands such as the organizations present that have been spoken about here. And everybody else just continues. So make sure you check the chat. And here in Artivism, before we close the presentations, we have a key takeaway. What will be your key takeaway for the audience today to leave with an action item from your presentation?
Was that a question for me?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just reading some of the stuff in the chat. What do you think the key takeaway is? I think earlier on in the presentation, I talked about that mind the gap game. And I took a few minutes to really spell out the age groups out there and knowing which one you are and what's behind you and what's in front of you and what's upcoming. And I think that's something to keep in mind, whether you're an artist, a designer, kind of think about where it is you stand in this space of this planet that's getting very complicated. Things are much more complex than they ever have been. And I don't even think the medical community can keep up, like they're trying to solve Alzheimer's. And yet there's a giant population of people in their 60s and 70s now flooding hospitals and doctors' offices with issues related to Alzheimer's. Like they can't even keep up. So what I would ask is that what you would take away is do what you can to stop the world, know where your place is, and then start to think about, okay, how can I apply my skills, my passions to an organization or a product that I care about? I'll give you a good example. I happen to love Jersey Mike's. I don't know why. I love Jersey Mike's subs. I hate Subway subs, but I love Jersey Mike's. And, there are brands out there that you start to really get an attachment to. I like the people who work there. Same thing with Panera. I love Panera. Like they do a great job. And when they make a sandwich or something from a salad for me, I thank them and I talk to them because I think, that's pretty special to walk into a store today, fast food especially, where you're not just treated like a number and asked to leave, and they just shove your burger in the bag. It's nice that people are starting to care and start feeling that, see if you can start to connect with a brand, whether it's a brick and mortar or just something maybe you order constantly online, and see if you can connect with them in some manner and say, hey, you know what you can improve? Because I don't know, I look at that all the time. I mean, I have Fire Stick, the Amazon Fire Stick, and I have a lot of issues with the usability of it, and I want to get them, and I feel like I can't. My voice isn't being heard, But just look at some of the faults in everything that you do, and say to yourself, "Gee, could that be made better? How could that be made better?" And that to me is what I would take away from it.
Oh, thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about and hopefully provoked us a bit to take action, right? To do something to, inspire our students and young people to be more mindful, inspire them to do something. And like you said, what are we good at? Try and incorporate that into inspiring change. Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you so much, John. Hopefully, we'll meet up again, maybe take your class or one of them. They sound really interesting. I know I'll share with my students. Thank you to our sponsors, Adelphi University, Sing for Hope, Gottesman Libraries Teachers College at Columbia University. And we hope to see you again next week as our final presentation. And then we go into season 8 in the fall of 2024. So thank you again. Be well, everyone. Have a good night. And of
Take
course,
care,
thank you
everyone.
to Carolina, my pal.